Hey, listen up. Jeff works at a subcontractor's factory for my company. It's such a tiny place that it would go bankrupt right away if my company stopped doing business with them, just making little screws and springs and stuff.
At the after-party venue for the high school reunion. Regardless of the classmates getting hyped up singing old hits from our high school days at karaoke, Tom used the spare mic to shout. I couldn't say anything back. Seeing me like that, Tom got even more carried away.
As everyone knows, I'm the son of a big corporate CEO. Right now, I'm working there in sales, but eventually, I'll be the CEO.
Saying so, Tom took the hand of the girl sitting next to him. It was Alice, whom I have a crush on.
Alice, you prefer me over that pool guy, right?
I involuntarily looked down. I didn't want to see her reaction. Oh, why did I even come to this reunion? I wanted to see Alice. If I could see me in the past, I would yell, "Don't go." But this reunion was about to drastically change our fates. Upon hearing the reunion was being held, I decided to go. When I casually inquired with the organizer, I was told that Alice, a classmate I had been curious about in high school, would also be there. Alice and I were only together in an art class, not particularly close. We only talked once. I liked her posture as she painted with brush in hand. Her straight hair was neatly tied at the back, her back straight as an arrow, looking down with calm eyes, her expression serious as she moved her brush over the canvas. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I attended high school without skipping just to see her. I've grown up since then. Seeing me now, maybe she would see me in a new light. Maybe we could exchange contacts, go out for dinner together, and get closer. Such dreams of mine were brutally shattered upon arriving at the reunion venue. She wasn't there. After the toast to celebrate our reunion, a woman came over to me. It was Sophia, a friend of Alice.
You're Jeff, right? You've changed so much since high school. I almost didn't recognize you. You used to have such a bad boy vibe.
She said that with a beer in her hand, and I laughed back. Hey, Sophia, you were friends with Alice, right? Are you still in touch?
Of course, we're still friends. She said she'd be late today. Might join us for the after party.
Sophia gave me a meaningful smile, and I looked away, feeling embarrassed. It's obvious I'm aiming for Alice, isn't it? After the main event, those who were going to the after party decided to head to a karaoke place. It was raining outside. Unfortunately, I hadn't brought an umbrella. Like me, those who had forgotten theirs were squeezing in with others who had umbrellas. Left alone and about to be left behind, I was about to give up and head out into the rain when I heard a clear voice.
Come under?
Just as I heard it, a black umbrella covered me. Looking at the owner of the umbrella, I was momentarily stunned. The straight hair, those cool-looking eyes looking up at me. Though she looked more polished than in high school, it was undoubtedly Alice. My heart started beating loudly. Alice.
Yeah, long time no see, Jeff.
While I was nervously gathering heat in my face, Alice seemed calm. As if letting me under her umbrella was no big deal, she started walking. I hurriedly matched her pace, careful not to step out from under the umbrella. The after party was held at the karaoke place. Singing songs popular during our high school days, My classmates were getting nostalgic. I wasn't in a position to feel nostalgic. Alice, who lent me half of her umbrella, sat next to me. I was constantly nervous, feeling the subtle warmth from her side. I wondered where my earlier farts of getting closer to her had gone. Alice, who had occasionally glanced at me, seemed to make up her mind and softly said, "Well, that's when it happened."
Let's sing together, Alice.
Suddenly, a bright yet somewhat sticky voice was heard, and a man rudely barged in between us. It was Tom, a classmate. Alice looked perplexed.
I'm not really familiar with recent songs.
What? You know the old ones, then? How about these?
Well,
Alice looked at me, seeming troubled. "Cut it out, Tom. Alice doesn't like it." Tom then looked at me as if I was something vile.
Oh, Jeff, should you be acting this way towards me? If you lose your current job, you'd be in big trouble, wouldn't you?
what do you mean, Tom?
Alice, sounding confused, watched as Tom smirked and puffed out his chest. Then, grabbing a spare microphone from the table, he raised his voice regardless of others singing, "Hey, listen up.
Jeff here works at a subcontractor's factory for my company. If my company stops doing business with them, they'd go bankrupt in no time, just making tiny screws and springs."
I couldn't say anything back. Seeing me like that, Tom got even more carried away.
As you all know, I'm the son of a big corporate CEO. I'm working there in sales now, but I'll be the CEO eventually.
Saying so, Tom took Alice's hand.
Alice, you'd prefer me over such a poor guy, right?
I involuntarily looked down. I didn't want to see her reaction.
By the way, Jeff, back in high school, you stole Alice's art tools, right? You're not in a position where you have to steal to make ends meet now, are you? I'd hate for someone to steal this Rolex of mine.
While saying this, Tom flaunted his gold watch on his left wrist. He was just bragging, though he said he'd hate for it to be stolen. But what Tom said earlier made the others start looking at me like I was a criminal, murmuring as if remembering something. I couldn't help but sigh. In high school, I lived freely, ignoring those around me. In other words, I went astray. My mom was the reason I was so lost. I had an older brother. He was what you'd call a genius, remembering everything he saw and excelling in sports, music, and arts right away. In contrast, I was just average. I had to work hard just to be slightly better than average in studies and sports. My mom doted on my genius brother. I came to terms with it. Because my dad and brother praised me whenever I did well in tests or sports. However, when I was in 6th grade, my brother and dad died. We were on our way to a tutoring session in my dad's car when the accident happened. I was the only survivor. It seemed my mom couldn't accept that fact.
Be like your brother.
She demanded in the dimly lit morgue where my brother and dad lay. I could only nod. My grandparents had already passed away, and I had no other relatives to turn to. My mom was the only family I had left. But I was just an average guy, so unlike my brother, I had to work hard to excel in studies and sports. Whenever my mom saw my efforts, she'd scream, "Your brother never had to do that," forcing me to hide my hard work from her. Naturally, I couldn't keep this up for long. I failed in my application to middle school. I wanted to get into the most prestigious school in the district, but I was spectacularly rejected.
Your brother would have passed with flying colors. You're nothing like him.
My mom hysterically threw at me. After that, she started treating me like I didn't exist. The stress of being ignored by my mom and the pressure of trying to be like my brother led me to lose. I ended up at a mid-tier high school, where I became the student with the worst grades and behavior. I dyed my hair my favorite shade of blue, wore earrings, and never buttoned up my uniform, flaunting my flashy shirts underneath. Warnings from the school authorities meant nothing to me. I fought as soon as I got angry. I also didn't take classes seriously, and never did my homework. Of course, I skipped practical lessons. As a result, my classmates kept their distance from me. I found out Alice was from a single-parent family one day, a month after school started. After school, the students had to part and clean up before leaving, but of course I skipped it. Whistling my way to the lockers, I overheard two girls talking.
Weren't you on trash duty today?
I had something to do, so I asked Alice to cover for me.
Alice, the new class president, right? Are you close?
We were in middle school together. She's always acted like a top student. Maybe she's desperate for male attention because she's from a single-parent family. It's so obvious how she tries to impress our male teachers.
Annoyed, I kicked the lockers. The girls, startled by the noise, looked at me, faces pale. Maybe she's not just acting. Maybe she had to become a top student. Without a word, the girls quickly left. Frustrated, I threw my shoes into the locker and stormed out of the building. That incident made me start paying more attention to Alice. The fact that we were both from single-parent families intrigued me. However, it didn't take long for me to fall for her serious demeanor while she practiced painting in our art class. Months after, I stopped skipping the elective just to watch her.
No way.
Alice went to her locker and exclaimed. A friend, who was also in the art class, asked, "What's wrong?"
My art set is gone.
Did you leave it somewhere else?
No, I only keep it here.
I was at my locker, so I heard their conversation. Quietly leaving, I went back to the classroom. Though we were supposed to move to a different room for elective classes, a few students were still there. Ignoring them, I rummaged through the cleaning supplies and other students' desks, searching for Alice's art set. The remaining students left the classroom as if fleeing from me. Ignoring the bell, I continued my search and found Alice's art set in another student's desk. I took it and headed to the art room. Entering late, the teacher just glanced at me and said nothing. I knew the teachers had written me off as a lost cause, so I ignored them and went to Alice. She was borrowing supplies from the art room. She looked up at me, eyes wide with surprise. "Here you go." I handed her art tools, almost shoving them at her. She was taken aback. Realizing they were her own, she looked surprised.
These are mine. Why do you have it?
It's what Alice was looking for, right? Jeff, don't tell me you stole them.
Tom, who had also chosen art class, cut in with a puzzled tone. Glaring at him angrily, Tom shrugged and said, Well,
Jeff comes from a single-parent home, And he's poor, so poor people have sticky fingers, huh?
Tom's muttered words reached the other students, and their gazes shifted to me as if I were a criminal. Feeling unbearable, I clicked my tongue and left the classroom. I thought I heard Alice say well, but I ignored it. Lost in thoughts of the past, I was brought back to reality by Alice's voice saying, "Everyone listen." She stood boldly with a microphone in hand.
Jeff didn't steal my art tools. He just found out they were missing and looked for them. Right, Sophia?
Alice then looked at Sophia, who was sitting diagonally in front of her. She nodded vigorously.
I saw Jeff come back to the classroom before elective class and search around for something. I was scared of him at the time, so I left quickly, but he was looking for Alice's art tools.
I hesitated, wondering if it was okay to nod. But Sophia's statement changed the atmosphere, and people started to see me in a new light. Tom, however, was desperate to destroy this new perception.
Come on, he was just pretending to look for them and returned what he stole, right?
Knock it off, Tom. The whole idea of Jeff stealing was because of you. You were the one who started saying he's from a single-parent family and poor. We're also to blame for looking at him with prejudice.
A guy from the art class said this, and everyone nodded. They looked at me, saying, "Sorry, Jeff, and I know it's late, but..." Avoiding a stunned Tom, Alice stood in front of me, and she apologized to me.
I'm sorry. I've always wanted to apologize. I knew you hadn't stolen them, but I couldn't correct it.
Hearing Alice's words warmed my heart. I was happy to know that she had believed I was innocent all along. At the same time, the feelings I had for her in high school began to resurface. If there was ever a chance to get closer, it was now. Alice, come, if it's okay with you. Can we exchange contacts? But it was Tom who interrupted me again.
What? Do you want to exchange numbers with Alice, just because she's been nice to you? Don't get cocky, you poor thing. Alice is going to marry me, right, Alice?
The room buzzed, and Sophia exclaimed in surprise, "Is that true, Alice?" Alice just looked down silently. I felt as if I'd been punched in the head.
Jeff, you might have been aiming for Alice, but a poor guy like you marrying her, that's impossible.
Tom's mocking laughter echoed in my head. My memory after that was very faint. I don't remember how I got back to my apartment. Waking up to the bright morning sun and the alarm clock, I was surrounded by beer cans. Sitting up, my head throbbed painfully. It was clear I had drunk in despair after hearing that Alice was going to marry Tom. Holding my shaky head, I went to work. But in that state, I shouldn't have. I slipped and dropped a box full of screws onto my foot. I was rushed to the hospital. Diagnosed with a fractured foot, I was admitted for treatment. The factory manager who rushed to the hospital let out a deep sigh when he heard about the accident. I tensed up involuntarily, and he said, "Oh, sorry."
It's not that I'm disappointed in you. I just want you to be at ease.
Those words naturally soothed me.
It's rare for you to have an accident like this. Did something happen? I heard you were going to your high school reunion yesterday.
While waiting for the hospital room to be prepared, he asked me, and all I could do was look down. I couldn't say it was because the girl I liked rejected me and I drank recklessly.
Speaking of high school, that was when your hair was blue. You really surprised me back then.
The factory manager looked at me with concern, yet with a hint of nostalgia. I first met the factory manager while I was still in high school. That day, I went to school, but left before noon, bored and not wanting to go home. Wandering aimlessly when it suddenly started raining. I stopped by a store to buy an umbrella. Reaching for the last one, so did the factory manager. He retracted his hand in surprise and said, "Please, take it." There was only one umbrella left. I looked at him. He was wearing a suit, soaked from the sudden rain. Yet his briefcase was not wet. He held it carefully so as not to get wet. "I don't need it. You use it, old man." I said that, and dashed out of the store. I could hear the factory manager calling, "Hey kid," but I ran away. The next day, I caught a cold. However, I dragged myself to school because it was an art class that day. After the art class, I staggered out of school. On the way home, I saw the factory manager in his work uniform again. Seeing me struggling, he widened his eyes and offered me a ride home. Not just that, seeing no one was home, he took care of me. "I'll borrow your kitchen," he said, and brought me warm soup. I didn't touch it for a while, steaming hot in front of me. "Why are you taking care of a stranger like me?" I snapped, but he didn't seem to mind.
You gave me that umbrella yesterday, and it really helped me. I was on my way to a critical business meeting that could affect the factory's future. I wanted to thank you, so I looked for you. Your blue hair made it easy to find you,"
he said with a light laugh. Comforted by his smile, I finally tasted the soup. It was delicious. Realizing it had been a long time since I had someone else's cooking, I shed tears.
"Are you okay?"
Concerned, the factory manager listened as I told him about myself. I lost my dad and brother when I was in elementary school, and my mom told me to be like my brother. He was a genius, so she loved him more than me. I tried hard to be like him for her, but it was impossible. No matter how hard I tried, my mom never acknowledged me. I tried so hard, but I could never be like my brother. I must have been weakened by the fever to share such things with someone I just met. And I always wanted someone to hear that. The story I had a hard time with. The factory manager listened earnestly to my story, then gently patted my head and said, "You did well." Reminded of how my dad and brother used to praise me, I cried again. Since then, the factory manager occasionally checked in on me. Knowing I came all the way from the next town over, I asked if it was all right for him to be away from the factory. He laughed and said, "The employees are all reliable, so there's no problem if I step out for an hour or two." I felt he was a good factory manager who trusted his staff. He scolded me when I didn't go to school and looked worried when I got into fights. After meeting him, I gradually started to study more, and he praised me for it. When it was time to decide on a career path, I told him I wanted to work under him.
"Really, of course, I'd be happy to have someone kind and hardworking like you. But I think of you like my own son. You've already worked hard enough. I want you to live the life you desire, to be true to yourself."
Feeling a warmth in my chest, I wanted even more to work with him. I bowed my head again and said please, and the factory manager said, "All right."
"But there's one condition. You have to live in the company apartment. You need to get away from your mother."
I immediately agreed to the condition. I told my mom I would work instead of going to college and move into the apartment, but she showed no reaction. Hospital life was dull. The factory manager lent me a book to pass the time.
Try reading this once in a while.
He said, handing me a novel. It was a collection of short stories, so even I, he seldom read, could get through it. The one I'm reading now is about a middle school boy who meets a mysterious girl in a park on a rainy day after art class. This girl only appears in the park on rainy days. Drawn into the story's chilly, rain-like atmosphere, I suddenly wanted to breathe the fresh air outside. I put the book on my lap, moved the wheelchair into the garden. I dropped the book due to a little bump in the aisle. As I bent down to pick it up, a white and beautiful hand quickly grabbed it. Recognizing the hand, I looked up in surprise. There was Alice. I stared at her in astonishment, not expecting her to be in a hospital far from home.
What a coincidence.
I just nodded to Alice, who picked up the book. She was wearing hospital-issued clothes. Was she admitted?
Did you break your leg?
Yeah, had a bit of an accident at work. I wanted to ask Alice why she was here, but hesitated.
Can we talk for a bit?
Tilting her head slightly, and I nodded. Alice pushed my wheelchair to a bench in the garden, and then slowly sat down beside it.
I'm sorry about what happened at the reunion.
No, you don't have to apologize, Alice. You didn't do anything wrong. She looked relieved, then seemed to struggle with whether to speak or not. Tilting her head, she finally took out her smartphone from her pocket.
Well, you were about to ask to exchange contact information back then, right? Is that still okay?
I was excited to be asked that. Of course, I replied and hurriedly took out my phone. Seeing Alice entered in my contact list, I couldn't help but smile.
How long are you in for, Jeff? I'm here for 2 weeks.
I've got a week. Started 2 days ago, so about 4 days left.
4 days, huh? Can we chat during our stay? I don't have much to do.
Yay, absolutely. I was bored too. So, for the next 4 days, I spent a few hours after lunch with Alice. I was anxious about whether my conversation with Alice would continue, but that worry was unfounded. We both had plenty we wanted to talk about. In particular, we talked about the hardships of single-parent families.
My mom has to work, right? I didn't want to add more worries to my mom, who was already tired from work, so I tried to be a good kid.
Alice was always so responsible. Unlike you, I went astray.
But you had your reasons for that, right?
Alice looked up at me. I didn't want to talk about my mom with her, though. I didn't know why Alice was hospitalized, but I didn't want to burden her further. Seeing that I didn't want to talk, Alice continued.
My mom passed away last year. I have no other relatives, so I'm all alone.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you living around here now?
Yeah, after going through a lot, I quit my job and recently moved here.
Alice didn't seem inclined to elaborate on the a lot part. I was vague about my mom too, so I figured we were even. 4 days later, I was scheduled to be discharged as planned. Alice saw me off at the hospital entrance.
I'm glad you're getting out all right.
She said with a smile. But it seemed forced, tinged with sadness. So I looked straight at her and said, "I'll visit you every day until you're discharged." Alice's eyes widened in surprise. Then she covered her mouth and laughed.
Okay, I'll be waiting. But don't overdo it, okay?
"I'll be fine," I replied cheerfully and left the hospital, while Alice waved at me with a big smile. A few days later, during my daily hospital visits, Alice told me she would be discharged the day after tomorrow. I was thrilled to hear the good news. "That's great, Alice. I'll take a day off to help you with your stuff."
I don't have that much to carry, but if you want, how about we celebrate afterward?
"Celebrate?"
Yeah, a celebration for both of our discharges.
I like that idea. Agreed. A dark shadow fell between us as we were chatting in good moods. It was Tom.
I've been looking for you, Alice. Never thought you'd be hospitalized here.
Alice's face, bright just moments ago, clouded over.
Tom, why are you here?
Jeff, why are you with Alice? You're in the way. Go home.
I felt a sinking feeling, remembering the talk about Alice marrying Tom. Something I had been trying to avoid thinking about. I tried to leave the hospital room in silence. Then, Alice pulled the hem of my clothes.
Don't go.
There were tears in her eyes, hinting at some deeper issue. "Tom, can we talk for a sec?" Grabbing Tom's arm, I forcibly pulled him into the hallway.
What the heck? That hurts. What if you broke my arm? You can't afford to pay damages. You're broke.
"This is a hospital. Keep it down. Besides, what do you mean you were looking for Alice? As her fiancé, shouldn't you have been notified that she's here?" Tom clenched his jaw, saying nothing, which made me frown. "Hey, you're not lying about marrying Alice, are you?"
It's no lie. Alice is all alone since her mom passed away. Marrying me would secure her future, right? I'm telling you, I'm marrying her for her sake.
His condescending tone infuriated me. "You say it's for her sake, but have you even confirmed her feelings?"
Alice wants to marry me, obviously. She's never turned down my invitations.
I began to doubt it. When I heard at the reunion that Tom and Alice were getting married, I believed it. However, after seeing her tearfully begging me to stay, she no longer seemed like someone who wanted to marry Tom. Tom seemed unwilling to leave the scene. Left with no choice, I played my trump card. "Leave, or I'll tell Alice that her art tools came from your desk." Tom's face turned pale, and he gasped for breath. Seeing my chance, I asked what I had always wondered. "Why did you steal Alice's tools? Was it to harass her?" Tom shook his head and glared at me.
If only you hadn't found them, I could have claimed I found Alice's art tools. Then she'd owe me one.
I was astounded. He was still trying to gain Alice's favor by indebting her. I clenched my fists, resolved never to let him near her again. "If you leave now, I won't tell Alice about the art tools." With the most menacing voice I could muster, I glared at Tom, who broke out in cold sweat and let out a whimper before fleeing. After watching Tom's retreat, I returned to Alice.
Where's Tom?
"He's gone." Relief visibly washed over Alice's face.
I used to stay in touch with Tom after high school. My mom was happy I was close with wealthy Tom, so I couldn't just dismiss him. When my mom got sick, Tom's company had flexible hours, so I joined. It was helpful, but after she died, he started pressuring me to marry him, saying he'd take care of me.
Alice gripped the blanket tightly, and tears began to stain it.
My mom used to say I should marry Tom, so I thought maybe I should fulfill her wish. I owed him for getting me the job. But I couldn't stand the thought, and I couldn't bring myself to say it, which just led to more stress until I developed an ulcer.
So that's why you're here. Alice nodded faintly.
I thought this was a good opportunity to quit my job and get a referral to this hospital. I wasn't planning on going to the reunion, especially if Tom was there. But when I heard Jeff was coming, that's why I decided to go. I hesitated on the day and ended up missing the first part.
Alice looked up at me. Her earnest eyes made my heart race.
I wanted to apologize for back then, but also because I liked you. That's why I wanted to see you.
The word "like" sent a rush of warmth through me. But we hardly talked, right? Only when I returned your art tools. As I fumbled for words, Alice smiled softly.
It was about a month after we started school. Like I said, I was trying to be good, so I couldn't refuse when classmates asked for favors. That day, I was stuck with trash duty. Reluctantly collecting the trash, I went to the garbage area. That's when I heard the girl who asked me to do it talking bad about me. I was so shocked. I just stood there.
Alice reminisced, her gaze drifting towards the window.
Then there was a loud noise. When I snapped back to reality, I saw Jeff kicking the locker. And you said she wasn't just pretending to be a top student, she had to become one, didn't she?
Alice gently stroked her chest, while I felt my cheeks burning with heat. Back then, I didn't know anything about Alice, yet I said such pompous things. Just because we were both from single-parent families, I got carried away, feeling like it was about me. Alice slowly shook her head at my excuses.
Those words you said struck a chord with me. That's why I remember them so clearly. I was happy to know that Jeff saw me for who I am. It was a relief. Yet, I couldn't defend you when you were treated like a thief. I couldn't apologize or thank you.
Tears started falling from her eyes. I wanted to stop them. So I hugged Alice. You don't have to worry so much. I went to high school because Alice was there. Watching you earnestly practicing painting made me forget all the bad things. Those moments, just admiring the beautiful Alice, were enough. I could feel the warmth in Alice's cheeks up close. I like you. I've always liked you, Alice. After saying this, Alice buried her face in my chest with a joyful expression and hugged me back tightly. I asked the receptionist to ensure that Tom would not be allowed to visit Alice. Mentioning that she was being harassed, the receptionist quickly agreed. Then I went back to her again. When I told her that Tom had stopped coming to see her, she said reassuringly, "Thank you." I took a deep breath and said, "Hey, Alice, would you listen to my story about me and my mom?" She immediately nodded. I told Alice about how my genius brother and dad died in an accident, how my mom forced me to be like my brother, and how that led me to lose. Alice listened intently to my story. After I finished, she gently took my hands in hers.
That's why you could see me for who I am.
She said that and smiled. Feeling like Alice was embracing my past self, I started to cry. The next day, I asked the factory manager for some time to discuss something. I have a classmate looking for a job. Can we hire her here? She was always very diligent, like a class president throughout high school. After I pleaded, the factory manager crossed his arms, pondering.
Is this girl someone you like?
Caught off guard by the question, I felt my face turn red. Seeing my reaction, the factory manager smiled amusingly.
Putting that aside, if you're recommending her, she must be good. Can you tell her to bring a resume and come for an interview?
Thank you so much. Elated, I thanked the factory manager. A week after her discharge, Alice started working at the factory as an office worker. A month into her job, the factory manager said we had a meeting with a client, which turned out to be Tom's father's company. Tom was the business partner. As soon as he saw me, Tom frowned.
Why did you bring him along?
It's for his future learning. But do you know each other?
We went to high school together. Did you know he was a real troublemaker back then? Dyed his hair blue, wore piercings, skipped classes, and had the worst grades. I think you'd be better off firing him.
Tom reclined on the reception room sofa, smirking at me. The factory manager nodded. Indeed.
I think we will cut ties, as you suggest, with your company.
The room went silent. Stunned, Tom said, What?
We've been considering ending our business with you for a while. We owed your predecessor a favor and have been supplying goods at a loss.
Wait, what? If we stop doing business with you, your company will not just be in the red, but go bankrupt, right? Are you sure you want to end this partnership?
No problem. The deal with your company was at a loss, but we're still profitable overall. Ending our business will actually reduce our losses, which is a relief.
What about the debt of gratitude to my predecessor? Are you planning to repay kindness with betrayal?
We've repaid it sufficiently.
As Tom became increasingly agitated, the factory manager calmly stood up, looked at me, and said, Let's go. He then quickly left the room, and I hurried after him. Turning back, I saw Tom standing there, stunned. Are you sure about this? As he said, they were our major client, right?
As I mentioned earlier, we're still in the black overall, thanks to you.
Confused, I tilted my head, and the factory manager looked at me with softened eyes.
The client that compensates for this company's losses is the one we negotiated with on the day we first met. The bag I had that day contained important products and documents for the negotiations. Because you gave that umbrella to me, I managed to keep them dry, and the deal went through successfully. So it's all thanks to you. I can't associate with a company that mistreats someone like you.
Hearing this new information, I was dumbfounded. The factory manager then patted my back with a cheerful smile. Later on, Tom's company went bankrupt. They heavily relied on our products at a bargain price, and cutting off the deal left them unable to operate. Tom's father was now struggling with debt repayment, making Tom practically impoverished. I heard from Sophia this information. Our company, having reduced losses, decided to venture into new business areas. I was appointed to lead this new team, and thanks to our company's renowned product quality, the new venture was a huge success, boosting our performance and expanding the factory. It was a win-win situation. Good fortune came my way, too. Recognized for the success of the new venture, I was promised a position of the next factory manager. On the day I decided to become the next manager, I proposed to Alice, and she tearfully nodded in agreement. Now, between work and wedding planning, life is hectically blissful. I feel extremely happy. While deciding on the guest list for the wedding, Alice suddenly said,
I want to invite your mom.
"My mom." Alice nodded solemnly. "She won't come, for sure."
That's not true.
Alice's voice unexpectedly rose, and she quickly apologized.
I didn't tell you, but after you proposed, I went to see your mom to say that I would be marrying you. She said I was harsh on him. It took being apart to realize that. My apologies can't make up for it, so please give him the love I couldn't, and she bowed her head.
Recalling the last view of my mom's hunch back as I left home, my chest ached, and tears streamed down my face.
Can we invite her?
This time, I nodded affirmatively. Living under pressure to fulfill my mom's expectations led me astray, and I got lost. Yet, there were people who saw me for who I really was. Thanks to them, I regained my true self and am now firmly walking my own path in life. I hope that those I love can also walk their own paths.